Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show today. I'm really glad you could join us. Today, we have a really cool guest with us who actually follows the show, and we're going to be diving in and we're going to be talking about a lot of things, including how you can achieve real wealth in your life, amongst many other things, including achieving financial freedom. So with us today is best-selling author in personal finance and money thinking, host of the Transformation Nation podcast, owner of 30-plus companies, and founder of his own martial art, Yokido Damion Lupo. And now Damion outrightly rejects regret and speaks to it as the ultimate life failure. He has a unique approach to living a fulfilled life by breaking rules and making more mistakes faster than the competition. His key to success is playing by a different set of rules. He even bought his first rental house with a visa, a move that snowballed into owning 150 rental houses in 7 states in less than 5 years, which is a huge accomplishment. In 2008, he lost the entire $20 million, but recreated his wealth and reinvented his life over 4 transformational years. Now, today he leads 3 global companies with one unified mission: to free people from money bondage. And also, I have 3 of his books right here. We're going to be diving in to these topics today. So, Damion, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming.
Hey, Ty, it's good to be here, man. I'm excited about all the stuff that we're going to dive into. It's going to be a high-speed show, I think.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, man, because I, lost my butt in 2008 and had to come back from that as well. So I know we have a lot of stuff in common. Let's start with some of the basics. What do you think? Why do you think that wealth is ultimately a choice?
It's a choice because we're not in prison unless we put ourselves in prison. And again, that's a choice. We're just, people follow along because there's a tribal mentality. We do things because we don't want judgment. We do things because there's pain involved in not doing what we're told. And ultimately, we're told things that aren't going to support us, and they put us in these financial shackles. Just like when I was growing up and I was told, here are the rules, we don't have money, and you should go do this job and do. None of those things made any sense to me, and truly they were never going to set me free. They were something that made somebody else feel safe, and I think a lot of what we're doing is playing safe because we don't want to die. We're wired to play by the rules that will keep us alive, and they're not really serving us. I mean, most of the stuff we're taught really isn't serving us for a life by design. It's really just by this default way of moving through and serving somebody else's agenda, and that's the big thing we've got to shift around.
Yeah, it's very true. Were you, your family, they work regular hourly jobs?
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty classic. So dad was in the military, mom was working at a school, and we didn't really have resources. I mean, it was like middle or lower middle class. So I came from, there was no silver spoon. I was happy to have food on a spoon. It was just, it was very, very basic. And the messaging was, we don't have money. You want this thing, whatever it is, and we don't have money. And it was like pounded into me, scarcity, scarcity, scarcity. And then I was told, go get a government job. And I thought, this is stupid. Like, that's what you guys did. Why would I do what you did? You guys are always bitching about how there's no money, and yet you want me to do the same thing. I think there's a better way. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to figure it out. And that's when I started doing things differently. And that's the kind of the thing. We really have to be willing to step out, but it's scary when we're by ourselves because of the darkness in the woods. So that I definitely broke away from that because it was so frustrating. And the biggest advantage, I think, was that I was so upset. If you're not so upset, you kind of need to have an environment of people that will help you get out of that thing, because a trigger event is powerful if it'll knock you out. But if you're kind of ho-humming along and it's not that bad, you may never really change unless you get the right people around you to suck you into a new way of thinking.
Mm-hmm. It's very, very, very true. And I think you're right. I mean, especially as we change generations, and even those of us that are entrepreneurs that go from non-entrepreneur families, where you're right. Like, I remember telling my mom the first time that I was going to drop out of college and sell cars. Did not go over well at all, right? But, they just didn't understand that whole mentality. It was, you go, you get a college, and then you go to college and you get out and you get an hourly wage. And so it's interesting coming from these families that didn't have that entrepreneurial bug like we do.
Well, I remember when I got thrown out of college the second time, I forget which time, but it was when I started a bookstore, and they put the bookstore on campus out of business, and they called me in and they said, hey, you have to shut this thing down. They're going to leave. And I said, well, that's because they're overpriced. And they said, well, either shut your bookstore down or we're throwing you out. And I said, I'll be back in 2 days. I came back and said, thank you very much. I'm out of here. I paid for school that week, and I was done. It was an indication that I was on the wrong path. And I remember about a year and a half later, I did a house. It was like my third house. And I found this deal, and I took over a mortgage. I ended up putting it on the market for a couple $1,000s as a down payment from a person to buy it from me. And this guy said, I want to do more. Can I have a better payment, my monthly payment? I said, sure. What do you want to do? He goes, 25. And I said, okay. So I meet him at this house. He hands me a cashier's check for $25,000, not 2,500. And I said, wow. And what I realized is that wasn't that much less than what my parents made in a year net. And I just made this up out of thin air. And I thought, I can't even talk to my parents about this because they're going to think this is crazy or it's criminal or something. But it was a different psychology. I created a bigger solution. I wasn't just punching a clock. And wow, the solutions pay really well if you go find big problems. And so that was a huge shift. But it was also very lonely because who was I going to talk to about it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can relate to that completely. I remember going to my dad years ago when I was getting started here at Credit Suite, and I asked him opinion, and he goes, you've surpassed the level where I can help you. And I'll never forget that because it was interesting. You feel alone when the people that you trust the most are like, they can't be there for you anymore in that right, you know? So I could definitely relate. Now, you have something called the green and red arrows of wealth. What's that about?
Well, unfortunately, and typically people have most of their wealth, either they have a business or they have retirement accounts. And for most people, maybe they have both, one or the other. With retirement accounts, typically people are watching their wealth on the news. And this came up because one of my clients that I was working with said, we're tired of watching the news and seeing this green arrow that says the market's up and we're richer, but we know that the red arrow is probably coming tomorrow and we're going to be poorer and we're on this dang roller coaster up and down. And I said, what do you want to do? And they said, I want to get off the roller coaster. And I said, all right. So it was getting off of that thing so that we didn't care what the stock market was doing. We were caring more about our personal economy versus the other economy that we have no control of. And that was where I think that these arrows can be so destructive emotionally because whether they're up or down, you're on this ride that you can't control. And that's very, very dangerous for our emotional and spiritual health, if you will.
Makes a lot of sense. What do you think about entrepreneurship? I mean, how do you think entrepreneurs can really obtain financial freedom? Is it different? Because this is the problem, right? Is that we're typically all in on our business. And I would imagine that most that you're seeing and dealing with, this is the biggest asset value that they own. So how can entrepreneurs really obtain financial freedom? Is diversification the way? Do you go all in on the business? That's always a question I have because it's like you should almost keep your focus on the business. But if you keep your focus on the business grows faster. But then if you focus on other things, you could diversify. And there's this like tug and pull of what you should be doing.
Well, great example of this is a lot of medical professionals. I have a lot of doctors that I've worked with over the last couple of decades. They have great practices, and then they're the worst investors on the planet. And it's because they go, I'm so smart. And granted, I'm broadly generalizing, but I've seen it so many times. I know it's not a one-off. They go into investments and they go, oh yeah, I am so smart. And basically somebody is feeding their ego. And so they have no financial intelligence around investing. And they take all their money, the wealth they've created in their business, and they transfer it to something they don't know anything about, some tech widget versus a heart valve that they actually might know something about. And they get diversified into something that is basically somebody else's wallet where all their money goes. So should we focus on our business? Yes. And should you build another skill set that you have to figure out how to keep your money growing? Yes, because your money growing is different than creating money in a business. They're different skill sets, different mindset. And it's a big part of that is like you learned your business, you've got to go around people and be around seminars and other professionals that are investors. And this is different than just people that are selling investments. And I really want to hammer on this for a second because a lot of times people say, well, I've got a financial advisor. And I say, no, you don't. You have a financial salesperson. Doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that they're selling you products. Ask them where they make their money. Life insurance, financial advisors, most people in that space don't make money because they're putting all their money in the stuff that they're telling you about. They make money off of commissions. And so if you're going to be a smart investor, you have to understand the investments and you have to understand metrics and things. And it's a different language. So as much as we focus our time on business, we also have to decide we're going to spend some time on investing so that we don't just make a bunch of money and then lose it on the other side when we actually invest it somewhere else.
But it's easier said than done, right? A lot of people don't want to go through that period of education. They don't have the faith in themselves in that area to even really go with the knowledge they have and apply it. And I think a lot of them are just thinking that they're going to exit and sell the business and for a windfall, right? And then that's all they're ever going to do. I mean, do you run into that? And how do you overcome that with people that are entrepreneurs that just don't want to take the dive to actually learn what needs to be learned?
Well, this is where people have smoked way too much hopium. They go, "Oh, I hope it works out. I sell my business." Yeah, and then they go, "Where'd my money go?" And then they go, "Well, wait, maybe if I just read Tim Ferriss some more and I can hack my way to 4 hours a week of doing something." Like there's all these baloney mindsets. Uh, we have to be willing to engage in whatever matters, that's the problem. We're exhausted, we're tired. It's uh, people do think that they're going to have an exit event, that they're going to be the next Snapchat. Here's what we have with Snapchatters in Santa Monica right now. We have a bunch of people that have 10, $20 million, and they're all angel investors now. And they go, "Oh, I'm so smart." I'm like, "No, you're not. You're part of the Lucky Sperm Club. It's not that smart. You just did something cool and you got lucky. You hit red. So now you got this money, and what they're going to have is an experience. And you watch, 5 years from now, there's going to be a bunch of Snapchat turned angel investors that are on the bestseller list of how I lost $20 million, like Damion in 2008. Like, this is what's going to happen. So just watch. Everybody thinks they're brilliant because they have cash, and people are trying to get to the cash moment, but it doesn't make you smart. It just makes you full of whatever you already think of.
It's interesting too, because I read this about lottery winners, right? That the way the mind is you try to get back to your norm. So like how they just blow so much money. And my roommate in the military, this is what he did. He won the lottery. And it was interesting to talk to him because this is what happened. Like, I'm like, how did you lose it all? He's like, I'd buy a boat for $100,000 and then sell it for 5 because I didn't care. And it's almost like they sabotage themselves to get back to a level that they're used to and comfortable with.
What you're hitting on right there is so big. It applies to absolutely everyone listening. Your external is going to be a reflection of your internal. When Chris and I wrote Reinvented Life, we talk about the shifting, the reinvention internally, externally. When I made a bunch of money, part of the reason I lost 20 million in 2008 was because my internal did not have the integrity of somebody that would maintain a $20 million portfolio. So I didn't have that piece. It wasn't just integrity. It was the lack of ethics and morals. And there was a big problem. You have to have those ethics and morals to maintain wealth, because that's just how the universe works. And if you want to argue with it, good luck. It's like saying, "I don't believe in gravity." Well, you know what? You're wrong. So, they're just truths that happen, and it might be a mystery of the universe, but that is how it works. So if you want to increase your net worth, your life, you've got to increase the inside. And that's where the personal development work happens, where when you said earlier, a lot of people don't want to do the work. I agree. And the problem is you're never going to get the external benefit for more than a flash if you don't do the internal work to allow you to have the foundation that's going to be consistent with the external world.
Mm-hmm. And I had that happen too. I have a friend that had an exit, multi-billion, and then put it back into his next business, blew it all. And, now he's with the rest of us, working with the profits that you have to grow the business. I mean, you have probably hundreds of stories the same, but how do you get this to both? I mean, how do you get to happiness as an entrepreneur and then also have this financial wealth simultaneous? Because it almost seems like there's two different things. Like, how do you get both of them at the same time?
I don't think that any one person is good enough. I think this is where the team effect comes into play. It's where you have people that are giving you feedback. I'm talking your accountant, your attorney, and your coach, and probably your board. And if you don't have those pieces, go get them, because it doesn't matter how much you build up, because you want to be able to fall in love with your business, the actual process. It's not just the exit. I think a lot of people make the mistake. They go, "I'm going to grind away for 5 or 10 or 20 years to get this exit of 2 or 5 or 10 million bucks." Well, you just gave away 10 or 20 years. That doesn't mean you don't pay the price, because discipline is a price you have to pay. There's also there's a focus you can have on something that actually matters, because it's more purposeful than just a moment in time where you get the money and then you go, "Now what?" Because there's not really any financial freedom in just a pile of cash, because you're going to be scared to death. You're going to lose it. People show up all the time at 50, 55 years old and they go, "Damion, I got this money. Now what do I do?" And I go, "Well, let's learn how to invest." And they're scared because they don't have 30 years to recreate the same 2, 5, 10 million bucks. And that's the horrible part. It's the skill set. Cash and cash flow are not the freedom piece. It's the confidence that you can do it. And it's the confidence it doesn't take 30 years. If that's your formula, that's why the stock market's so jacked up. You go put money into an IRA or a 401k for the next 20 or 30 years, and then good, it actually grew. Well, you don't have time to recreate it. So what happens when the market corrects? You're stuck. This is why you have to focus on the confidence and make sure you invest in the building of your confidence muscle. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of unicorns and puppy dogs and lollipops. It's never going to be real.
We found on the business credit side that little wins make a big difference, right? I mean, it's a process and people don't want to really commit to the process. So if you give them a little win, then they're like, okay, then it kind of gives them the motivation to move on. how do you advise entrepreneurs to kind of invest their proceeds? Where's some starting point where they can invest the money they have, they sell a business, they can invest those proceeds intelligently? Now, I don't expect you to teach us the whole investment strategy, right? But how do you kind of get past that to get to a point where, what are some easy wins, I guess is what I'm asking, where they can make some moves, do the right thing, and then that gives them the motivation to get in there and get the rest of their knowledge that they need to really do that with the rest of their money?
A couple of things that I always suggest to everybody, because they're really simple and they can start to get the momentum of feeling those wins. So one thing I do, because most people haven't touched anything, they have mutual funds, they have paper, all this stuff, they don't have anything. So I literally will say, look, I want you to go buy a little silver and gold. Why? Because you can hold it. You can actually feel real money. I'm not saying go put a bunch of your net worth like Damion into gold and silver. I'm saying go get something, hold it. Okay, you've got something, you've actually done something different. And the other one that I really like, and this sort of goes into the credit too, I like to help people be the bank on something small. Go do a little hard money loan with somebody, find something that feels really, really comfortable that you get, that's a short-term thing, and be the bank. Experience something where you're loaning money out with something that's got good collateral, and maybe it's 10, 20, 30,000 bucks you loan out, and you get this payment, and you're making 8 or 10% a year. Well, that is going to destroy any bank savings account or anything else. And what you realize is, wow, I can actually control my finances. I don't have to turn my stuff over. So doing those two things really starts to help people feel something physically and experience real cash flow that's safe. And it's actually very, very risk-free in a lot of cases when you have collateral. I just think it's so simple if you're willing to do something other than what you've been taught to do by a system that feeds and preys on you.
I love that. I love the physicality of just having gold or silver in hand so you could actually feel it, and then the reward that gets to go on. And what you're describing seems to be a huge shift we're seeing in the business lending space because, for example, peer-to-peer lending is this new wave where what they're doing is going to average people with even as little as $100, and some of them are 25 grand, and they're letting them invest into pools of money that then gets lent out to small businesses, right? So it's kind of a way to dip that toe in the water and start investing into businesses. So is that what you're seeing too? Because we see in peer-to-peer lending, we're starting to see companies pop up that are making it easier to invest into private companies versus public companies like you can in the stock exchange. I mean, from my perspective, it looks like this is a pretty big shift where average people are now gaining the ability to invest into businesses like they do, publicly traded companies.
The big part of the reason that this is happening is because technology is making everything appified on your phone. The other thing is the banks are getting more and more limited and more constricted in what they'll do for the most part. They don't want to play in this space. So you see the shadow banking is really what this is,
right?
And what you're describing. There's a couple different ways. I've seen a lot of these lending clubs and things, which is really cool. And I also like the one-on-one because it helps people understand psychology. It helps them learn more when they go directly to somebody. And at the same time, what you're describing is even, I think, as powerful or maybe more powerful because you can start with $100. You can do things. It's fast. You can literally get started this week. Whereas what I'm describing, it might take you a month or 2 or 3 or 6 months to get comfortable with somebody or something. And really, this is where the team comes back in because I think a lot of things out there are built for people to not have to think. And so you can just sort of throw your money and it all hopefully works out. But again, you got to stop smoking all the hopium. Like that is not a good strategy for your life by design. So
yeah,
it's really saying, okay, what big picture do I want to learn? What skill set do I want to have? And if you want to understand how to have money grow based on being a lender, then you've got to be a little bit more sophisticated. So there are different phases of that. Any one of those is going to make you better than just handing your money over to Wall Street and wishing it well.
My sister's a teacher, and this is one of the interesting things that she says that sticks with me is that, what's happened now is that people now, when they're proposed with a problem, they now think about where to go to get the answer to a question, where to go to get the answer instead of trying to figure out the answer to the question, And I think that is the big shift now is that with all of this technology and the internet and all the stuff that's available, now we kind of don't solve as much of our own problems. We just kind of go elsewhere to look for where the answer is instead of us actually trying to come up with an answer ourselves.
It's funny because we have all the information in the world, literally at the our fingertips with Google and things. I find when I'm looking out there, I kind of check my industry and I poke around a lot, and I just laugh because there's so much misinformation. The same questions asked, and you've got 50 different versions of the answer, and I go, where are these people getting this information? So there's plenty of information. The question then is, what actual sources, what people, and this is why having a team of vetted people that know what they're talking about and are not full of ego and they're not trying to just spin something. It's about having that core team where Google is not your only reliant source, because Google will it'll kind of give you whatever information you want. If you want to justify your thinking, it'll give it to you. So this is where you got to have your team, but truly the information is out there. And this rugged, individualistic American philosophy of I'm going to do everything myself is a very good way to be broke or go broke eventually. Because really in the real world, it's about teams. In school, it's about don't copy, don't collaborate, because that's cheating. Well, that's a dumb approach, because in the real world, the teams win, individuals get crushed.
Sure. Yeah, and that makes a bunch of sense. And I think this is exactly what we do see, right? I mean, I do that. We have a huge Facebook group, and somebody said, called my name in it and said, why don't you come and, Claire put all these people in their place that are wrong. I'm like, because there's only 24 hours in a day. I would just be sitting here all day, every day, telling every single person what the right answer is. But I think people are looking for shortcuts. And then there are these other people that prey on that. And then they're trying to create these shortcuts and make it out to be easier than it really is. And I think that stems a lot of this.
Well, it's funny. I beat up on him a lot, and I'm sure he's a good guy, and I've actually learned a lot from him. But the whole idea behind a 4-hour anything in your life, and God bless Tim Ferriss for doing his thing, because he's a genius. But if you think that you're going to make your life in 4 hours, or you're going to hack your way into what really matters, you're mistaken. That's not. Partly is because somebody else is going to spend 8 or 10 hours that week, and you're spending 4, and they're going to demolish you, right? So that's not going to work. So I think we need to be conscious of that there's a price that we pay. And when you were talking about in the very beginning, the whole idea of regret is 1,000 times more painful than the discipline. What people are doing is they're skipping the discipline. They're going for the hack. They're treating it like work is a 4-letter word. And then they end up at the end of their life going, oh man, like my dad did. Last conversation I had with him, he literally looked at me before he died and he said, there were so many things that I wanted to do. You want to talk about pain, something that you can't take back, that'll shake you to your core. It's experiencing somebody's pain that can't make the choice anymore. Man, that is the worst. Discipline, the work, not the hack. That's where it's at, and you got to put in the time up front.
Well, it sounds like you, and as I am, my parents raised me to work hard. I was always raised to be a very hard worker. And then I learned how to work smart. And then, one doesn't replace the other, but when you put those two together, it's really, 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 really powerful.
That's the ultimate combination. I often say that if it was about hard work, then all the landscapers would be multimillionaires. And granted, some of them are. But if you're moving rocks around, you go, this is the hardest work ever. And I've worked in I had polar bears chasing me in the Arctic Circle when I was washing dishes. Like, I've had some hard work, and that didn't. I was making $10 an hour. So clearly, that was not the millionaire path. But it's when you combine the work with these smarts and you bake in a purpose, you've got the ultimate trifecta. That's really kind of what you need. It's not just working hard and sweating lots. Like, that is not the formula.
Well, you're talking a lot about a team. So what do you mean by that? What kind of team do you put around you to make the best financial decisions?
Well, first off, we're talking about people that are smarter than you, that are specialized, so that you can be, Robert Kiyosaki talks a lot about this whole idea of being lazy and not knowing how to do anything. And I laugh, because the problem with being smart is you try to do too many things. You're like, well, I can do that, and I'm good at it. And then you learn other things and you do too many things. And it's better to be more of have the ability to communicate around different topics. I can talk law, I can talk accounting at a certain level. And then I have people like Tom Wheelwright, who I work with, and people, the attorneys that are specialists in different places. I have mentors and coaches that help me see blind spots, because that's one of the things too. We're not good enough to see what we can't see. Like, we don't have X-ray vision. I know we all think we're Superman, but the truth is, we need these people to give us feedback, call us on our BS, and be able to give us specialized knowledge, and then work together. Instead, sometimes I see people and they have their accountant and their attorney, but they never talk to each other. I'm like, well, wait, these are both on your team. And they say, well, no, but he doesn't really get it. So I talked to him about this and this, and I go, you don't have a team. You have fiefdoms that are fighting with each other. Like, this is crazy. So it's having those people. The most important person on your team is the person next to you. This is probably your partner, your spouse. And I think that's one of the things that's really hard for people when they have somebody really close that is totally disconnected, or they fight at these basic levels around money or finance. I see this a lot, and there's not a lot you can do with that other than, kind of a worst case scenario. But It's everybody that's around you, because they all influence you, and they're going to knock you down if they're not lifting you up. So you got to figure out, which one are they doing, lifting up or knocking down?
Well, you shouldn't be relying on anybody, as you've talked about, but well, it doesn't sound like you're thinking financial planners are the financial people you should probably have around you that have your best interest at heart. So who are the financial savvy people that make sense to have you in your circle and on your team?
The way that I figure out who should be on my team is the people that are doing stuff in real life. So one of the things that I do when I'm looking at people that I'm going to listen to in the finance world, the real estate world, I want to know who's actually investing, who's done things. Like I spend time with George Ross, who you may know. He was Donald Trump's attorney, and
Right.
the guy's, he's worth a few $100 million. He's actually done a lot of real estate. He didn't just do law. So I like people, like accountants, attorneys, financial advisors that are actually investing, that actually have businesses. If they're teaching me about business, I'm like, great, tell me about your employees. Like, I want your perspective by being in the streets, bleeding a little bit, not just reading a book about the theory of accounting and business. Like, I don't want that. I want you to tell me, I want you to be able to relate to me. So I'm pretty hardcore. I'll actually want people to share with me what they're doing, what their balance sheet looks like, because I want to know that they're real and not just a regurgitation of some information that they Googled or studied in an ivory tower. That's a really big part of vetting somebody, in my opinion, actual experience.
I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense. We had that problem in the company where when we started to grow, we would put managers in place, but then when the managers weren't doing the job, they became disconnected very quickly from what was really needed. And so now we have a rule that if you're going to lead a team, you have to work within the team. So if you're going to lead our sales team, you have to be selling, because otherwise you're not going to know the real problems that they're dealing with. So I just think it makes sense that you're only really relying on the people that are actually doing it, because there's a huge difference between people that preach about it and the people that are actually doing it and then talking to you about real successes and failures they've had along the way.
I think that's a big difference in general that unfortunately most people never think about. And if you're hearing this now, it's a good question to ask about the people in your life. Really, who are they? Do they have those experiences? Your team members, are they in the right places based on experience? And it's funny because people, it's back to this 4-hour hack or whatever you want to jump leapfrog. There isn't any way to do that, because I think you run out of integrity. There's a missing ethic around actually doing the work and showing up and having that background. You can't just skip over it. I mean, you can, and then you just end up like Leonardo DiCaprio in The Wolf of Wall Street. You're just spinning people around.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the mistakes that you see that can derail financial progress?
Thinking that you're too smart and it's all you, and not being willing to be wrong. On the same token, and the other side, I guess, is that we're not willing to make enough mistakes fast enough. So when I built up my portfolio with my business and my investments at the same time, I got to the point where I thought it was all me, instead of realizing that this was a wave, much like the wave we're in now. We've had this bull market for a long time, and a lot of people I see driving around in their Lamborghinis and their stuff, they think that they did it. I say, are you crazy? There's $4.5 trillion on the Federal Reserve balance sheet that helped you along quite a bit. So really thinking it's just you and not acknowledging that things cycle, one of the huge mistakes. And then not being willing to try things and put money into things, thinking that mistakes are actually bad. I think the mistakes are the most powerful gift that the universe has ever created. So those are the two things fundamentally that are the biggest problems that people should find more mistakes and acknowledge that it's not just you. And so you've got to be willing to adapt. That's actually the most powerful thing people can have, is the ability to adapt. It's not a skill set. It's how fast you can learn a new skill set or adapt to changing times and environments.
Yeah, and I think entrepreneurs are pretty good at that. We're pretty good at failing and then learning from those mistakes and moving on. But being an entrepreneur, I'm astonished at how much everybody else sucks at it. Like, truly, in my life, like to me, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, okay, you made a mistake, no big deal, learn, move on. And then it's amazing how many people fret on that, or then they continue to make exactly the same mistake, which I don't even understand. I don't understand how it's possible, because my mind won't work that way. But it is very true. It's almost like I only want to be around entrepreneurs, because when I'm not, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, how could you do that same thing 2 or 3 times? It doesn't even make any sense.
It's like being around zombies. I mean, you don't understand why they're doing it, because entrepreneurs have a different genetic makeup. I mean, I think we're closer to mushrooms or alfalfa than we are to humans. Like, there's a weird thing about being an entrepreneur. So yeah, I mean, I get it. And I think one of the things that we can also do to help our own sanity is to not try to change other people that don't have that, but leading and doing our thing, being authentic with ourselves. It's hard, especially when you love somebody and they're not an entrepreneur. You're like, come on, what are you doing? And they simply are looking at you like you're a crazy person, which in truth, we probably are a little bit, right?
Yeah. I get that a lot from my wife because my obsession is just to improvement. Like I just believe in self-improvement. And when I don't see that, I'm like, why would you not like want to get better there? Help me. And I'll ask her honestly, I say, help me understand because like my brain can't, I keep trying to produce a solution and I can't figure out an answer. So help me understand why you would not want to progress there. And she gives me answers that make perfect logical sense, I guess, to somebody else. I'm just like that's ridiculous. And we were talking about that, I think, once when, have you ever seen the video where the woman has a nail in her head? It's funny, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
the man
Oh
and
yeah.
woman, it talks about that. But that's the thing, is that, a lot of women and men, and a lot of time women, want to talk about problems, but don't necessarily want a solution. That just seems ludicrous to me. It's like, if I possess the knowledge to have the solution, why would I not help you understand what the solution is? It doesn't even make any sense. So it's funny that you say this because I could really relate to a lot of it on the personal side.
It's also, there's this thing about being an entrepreneur too, where I know that I have I cannot not finish something. Like I have to close the loop. I can't just go, oh, I'm going to do this thing. Like I see a lot of people, maybe like my parents, they were both in government jobs. Well, if you're not done, you just go home. Well, entrepreneurs don't, it's not how it works. Like we don't just say, oh, well, it's half done. I guess I'll go on vacation. Like you're like, well, vacation's going to have to wait. Like I'm going to be doing this on the plane, on the beach. Like it's just, we can't not finish things. There's a loop that we have to close, which is why it's really powerful to understand who you're working with before you hire or team up with
Sure.
somebody. Do they have that mindset, closing the loop? It is awesome. And it's crazy making to people that just punch clocks. They're like, why can't you stop? Like, I don't know. I just can't. It's who I am.
That's funny. Yeah, I believe much. I call myself a serial completer, which sucks when I get into books that are bad because I'm like,
Right.
man, like I have no choice but to read the book, and it's like torture to me because I'm such an avid reader and listener, and so it's funny you say that. How would you suggest entrepreneurs start setting goals? Because a lot of this seems about goals, but we can relate to that. Like entrepreneurs, we set goals and then we develop paths to get there. But how do you do that financially? What kind of goals are good financial goals and wealth goals for entrepreneurs to really start focusing on so they can put themselves on the right trajectory?
For one, there's got to be a combination of these short-term and long-term. I read Peter Thiel's book recently, 0 to 1, and one of the things he asks or suggests in there is that if you've got a 3 or a 5-year goal, ask yourself, how can you do this in 6 months? And I think that's very powerful because things are changing so fast. At the same time, I think we also need to say, what goals do I have that are impossible to reach in my lifetime? And I think this came from Ted Turner. Maybe his dad had reached his goal and then died. He needed a bigger goal because like when you don't have goals that really pull you, you don't have any gravitational pull from the moon. It's sort of like it's gone. And so we need a combination of both of those things that are beyond us, that are so inspiring that we can't help but to go, wow, you know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to mine asteroids because my name is Peter Diamandis. Like whatever it is for you, something that's bigger, but also the short term because you can stay in the woo and never actually get anything done. So, but before we even go to the goals, I think that the most important thing is to start with what we're actually grateful for. And there's a lot of gratitude chatter right now on the internet and podcasts and things. The way that I do it is I actually look back and I don't just look at the things I'm grateful for. I reconnect with them. So I look back every year. Right now, it's the end of the year. I look back and I say, okay, all these people impacted me this year. And then I start writing notes to them. I call them. I'm getting physically and physiologically engaged with those things I'm grateful for. That way, when I make goals, I'm not making my life wrong. I'm going, wow, what a great foundation I have with all this stuff. And I've engaged. It wasn't a fleeting thought. Oh yeah, glad for Ty, and then going to the next person. I'm like, I want to call you and say, hey man, I was thinking about you. Here's what's going on. What can we do? And just it's a different way of approaching goals versus here's the top 10 things I want for the next year. I think that's a really corny, dumb, non-effective way to do it. So short-term, long-term, start with the gratitude and physically engage with the gratitude first.
It makes a lot of sense. And I try to do I don't try 7 days a week, regardless of weather. I go for a walk and I do certain things on these walks. And one of the third of the process is just gratitude. What am I grateful for? I think that gratitude is so important. And the other thing I keep coming back to, it's interesting, is the people driving around the Lamborghinis, because I'm interested. I went through what you went through, right? Not the same thing. We both went to 2008. We got our butts kicked.
Mhm.
But what's interesting is that I see life through a whole different lenses. And
Yeah.
then when I get to younger people that have never experienced that, or when I get to my peers that had businesses that really didn't really falter in that, they just weren't in those kind of industries, it's still shocking to me, like, that they don't have that mindset that, like you said, it's a cycle, it's going to shift, you have to prepare your business for the ups and the downs. Like, they're just oblivious to this. And I guess I just keep coming back to that point because it's so true. So many people that didn't go through like what we went through, they don't even understand that that life is even possible, considering it's been so bullish for so long.
Big mistake. This is where I always like to make sure and suggest people have people that are balder and or grayer than you around, that have been through stuff, not just living but actually experiencing it, that went on those wild roller coasters, and so that they understand, because these cycles will continue the rest of our lives, for the rest of forever, as far as I'm concerned. And so yeah, it kind of makes me sad a little bit for people that were there but didn't actually experience it, because they don't have the understanding of almost like this sensory understanding, the X-ray vision. Like, I can see what's coming because I listen to people in coffee shops. I was in a clothing store the other day. It's funny. I'm looking for a pair of jeans, and this guy says, "What do you guys do?" And my friend says, "Oh, I'm in transition. I'm selling my house." And he said, "Oh, you know what? I'm a real estate investor when I'm not here. And so, do you want to sell your, like? Can I get some information?" And I was laughing, and I go, when the person in the clothing store is trying to buy houses as an investor, I know we're at the top of a cycle, just like I felt it back in '05 and '06. So I see these things and I just started laughing. I didn't even say anything. But having been through it, I know what it looks like. I know what it smells like. I can sense it, like spidey senses on the back of my neck. So that's the value of having people around. If it's not you, having somebody around that goes, look, I smell something here. Let me help you see what you're not seeing, because you're too full of your gas that you're smoking. You're smoking your own fumes. Like, what is wrong with you? So we gotta make sure we see what's not visible, the invisible that's actually going to hurt us, like it did in '06, '07, '08.
Well, beyond the team, what kind of skills and tools do you really think entrepreneurs need to become good investors?
Uh, a reality check, truth, numbers. Here's the thing. When I work with people, for years I've been doing this, and it's fascinating to me how few people actually have crystal clear metrics in their life, personal life, their investments, their business. It, like, even when they have numbers, they go, I got numbers, and I say, let me see, and they show me a P&L. I go, this is it? Like, show me your daily input output. Like, what's happening, your conversions. What are your investments doing a year ago, 5 years ago? People look at me like I'm an alien. And that is a skill set. And people go, I'm not the numbers person. I'm the salesperson. I'm the visionary. And I go, you better know the numbers. You better know what's going on, because the numbers are the truth. And you can talk yourself into a story, man. It's like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. That's who's on my team. Yeah, it's because that's what you believe in, fictitious crap. So it's, those numbers don't lie. Getting to the numbers is the first thing that anybody needs to do if they're going to change anything, or if they're actually going to have a hope and a prayer of actually something happening that's not just an accident. It's the numbers. The numbers don't lie. They're your best friend, because you can change them. You can't change a lie. And if you don't know what the numbers are, you're basically working with a lie, because it's not real.
Why are entrepreneurs horrible at this? I mean, it just seems like entrepreneurs in general are terribly bad at investing.
It seems slow and boring. I think there's a lot of juice. I think there's
That makes
adrenaline.
perfect
No,
sense.
dude,
Lost me at slow and boring.
we want juice. We want exciting. We want to hit these grand slams every time we're at the bat. When we're up, we're like, oh yeah, single, not very exciting. That in investing, you make a fortune by hitting singles over and over again. As an entrepreneur, we're trying to figure out how to go public every morning. Like, there's this mindset of huge big things. It's how we're wired. And so it's going back and forth it's a little harder, impossible. But that is what you need to do. You need to understand investing is not about grant. You're not venture capitalists and angels are looking for the 10x or the 100x type of thing. They also understand they're going to have a lot of singles. They're not trying to get a 10x or 100x on every investment. But entrepreneurs are always in that mindset. And so investing, they're like, oh yeah, this thing is going to pay me 1,000%. What is wrong with 8 or 10 or 12 or 15? No, I need 1,000%, because your entrepreneur brain is in your investor class or your investor seat, and they're different. That you got to think differently, and that's really hard. It's a different skill set. It's like one side, your entrepreneur side is Arnold Schwarzenegger, your investor side is Pee Wee Herman, and you're like, well, I don't understand why investor is not doing very well. Because he's a weakling. And you got to develop some new muscle. Like stop working out as Pee Wee Herman. Figure out what Arnold did and do the same thing on the other side of your life.
Damion, I've loved having you on, and there's so much stuff I'd love to dive into. I got to bring you back on the show because it's been a lot of fun. What parting thoughts? What are your parting thoughts?
When I wrote Reinvented Life years ago, the core message there that I had studied before that was asking the question, what is true? And for any of us that are either anxious or we want something different or we're trying to figure stuff out, the first question is really asking what is true. And what is true is going to be different from all of us. And it's really going deeper and deeper. That's the core question. I find that looking at numbers gets us to what is true, because you can find out about your behaviors, your values, your habits, everything that matters if you look at your credit card. And I don't think people like that, because it tells them, hey, you really have this fetish for this thing and it's really not helping your life and it's messing up your marriage and your business is suffering. So getting clear about the truth around your numbers is the one thing that I think everybody, including me, can do better and better at, because we can operate from a full deck versus a bunch of smoke.
Where can everybody go to learn more, to access all three of your books here? Where should everybody go? What action should they take?
Go to DamionLupo.com and there's a workbook you can download. It's when you go there, it's going to be the Reinvented Life workbook, and this is applicable to everybody because it's questions. If you have the right questions being asked to you, you've got the answers inside you, I promise. It's just, do you know the questions? And this will give you questions that will help you reinvent or shift or get clarity on the truth so that you're more powerful going forward.
Damion, thanks for coming on with us today.
Thanks, Ty. It's been awesome, man.
All right, so everybody listen, a lot of great information here, and there's a lot more information if you haven't seen it on DamionLupo.com. So my advice is that you need to go check that out. You also need to look into all three of his books, The Quick and Dirty Guide to Gold and Silver. Okay, right here we have the Reinvented Life that we talked about, and the QRP book, the Qualified Retirement Plan. This is awesome. So make sure that you go check out all three of these books from Damion. I'm also going to put a link to DamionLupo.com in the show resources. His Twitter, his YouTube, his LinkedIn, his Facebook. I'm going to make sure all that's there. But the important thing is to go to DamionLupo.com to grab this Reinvented Life workbook. That is the starting point. It's so important. I'm going to put like a flashing motion GIF image on his show page to direct you there. So make sure you check out DamionLupo.com. And while you're there, make sure you grab the Reinvented Life workbook. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Make sure that you visit DamionLupo.com. Thanks, everybody.